The whole idea of marketing is to let prospective clients know that you're in business as a consultant. Also to let them know that you meet certain standards of qualifications. You're skilled in a variety of methods, but also that you potentially have experience working on applications of quantitative methods, and that you're looking for projects. You are putting yourself out there. There's a lot of marketing approaches out there. You can rely on word of mouth. If you do good work on past projects, you might hope that your previous clients might be able to recommend you to some of their acquaintances. You can do a fair amount of online marketing, ads, social media exercises. You can send out a monthly or weekly newsletter to an email list. Key point is that not every approach is going to be applicable to you or to your context. There is an analogy with dating. If the clients don't know that you exist, they cannot find you. So I take the general view that anything you can do and everything that you do as a consultant to get a legitimate in with a prospective client in order to convince them that they should hire you for your services, that's marketing. Notice here the emphasis on the word legitimate. You don't want to be cheating your clients into working with you. Again, think of the analogy to dating. Now, if you work in a consulting firm, as opposed to just being an individual who takes on consulting projects, you usually won't have to take on marketing tasks directly. Perhaps indirectly, you might have to be involved with some of the events or endeavors that the marketing team is setting forward, but that's usually left in the hands of somebody else. If you're not part of a consulting firm, then you have to find a way to find clients and projects. You might want to join with other consultants in that endeavor to try to reduce your efforts and to minimize your costs. Form a consortium of small companies or a joint venture. One of the things that is very frustrating about marketing is that every time new technology pops up, your marketing avenues change. You need to stay up to date on these things. You might take a principled stand against a new tech that might get you support in some echo chamber of people who feel like you that these kids with their newfangled technologies, but it also marks you as an out-of-touch dinosaur. I only got a smartphone very recently. As far as these things go, I think my first smartphone I got about 4 years ago. I'm convinced that I lost a big contract with one of the tech companies in Canada because I did not have a smartphone. And they saw me as somebody who could not understand what they were trying to do. You need good marketing. That's a given, but that's not sufficient if you want to be successful. Right? You still have to be able to do the actual work. But in order to do the work, you need to get the work. Just as a perfect online dating profile might get you dates, but once you go on the dates, it's your personality that will carry the day. Which marketing vehicle are you going to use? Well, you have a number of questions you should be asking yourself. Does the vehicle give you an in? A legitimate in, remember? Is the marketing approach likely to convince the client that you're the right person for the job? What's the cost of using a specific marketing approach, both in time and energy, but also financially? Is this going to be a one-time investment, or is this going to be an ongoing investment? Are there risks associated with it? If you create a Twitter account for your consulting endeavors, how does that mesh with, well, your personal tweeting? Should there be a distinction between personal tweeting and professional tweeting? Are there universal guidelines to the approach you're using? If such guidelines exist, do you follow them, or do you walk your own path? Certain things will work for a project, or for a given client, or even for one consultant, but there's no guarantee that they'll work for other projects, other clients, other consultants. You need to be aware, and this isn't just true for marketing, you need to be aware the tyranny of past success. You should always be trying to determine if your current path is the right one or if you could try something else, something different. Here's a number of avenues you should at least consider. A current project-based CV, and it should be easily customizable so you can change it based on the client that you're trying to get in with. Perhaps you want to get some past client testimonial. You might want to set up an online or offline portfolio that's going to show people not just what projects you worked on, but what you did in these projects, including their pro bono projects as well. You should look into getting a social media presence. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. At some point I mentioned Google+. I don't even think it exists anymore. Perhaps you want to have a TikTok presence, an Instagram presence. Who knows what new technologies and apps will be popular next year, 2 years' time, 3 years' time. You should have a website which is functional and regularly updated. This isn't an avenue that I've chosen to have for my marketing. I rely on word of mouth for the most part. That being said, I do belong to an association of consultants that has its website on which we publish blog articles and white papers on a variety of topics. There we're trying to establish credentials. In the old days, you might have wanted brochures and business cards. You might still want those. Pre-pandemic, you wanted to attend conferences and networking activities, try to get to know what your competition is doing, try to get to know what the client space looks like, see what kind of projects clients seem to be interested in. I have to tell you, this is another one of the things where I'm like, I don't want to be doing these things. I find attending conferences difficult. I find networking activities difficult. I can do it if I need to, but it's never going to be my go-to method. I know of consultants, and I'm not kidding you when I say this, that love attending conferences, and they love networking activities. Not only because it might yield them projects down the road, they just love the activities themselves. One of the exercises I'm going to ask you to do is to build a project-based CV. There's going to be two main sections here. You'll have a traditional CV. How do I get in touch with you? What skills do you have? What are some of your achievements, your relevant experience, your education, personal development, personal stuff that you might want to share with a prospective client. And then there's a second main section, which is relevant project experience. In that section, you would list your projects, what role you had in them, describe the project a little bit, and talk about some of the related reports, presentations, dashboards, apps that have been produced as a result. Depending on the context, you might also want to add items related to your publication record or your teaching record. But in many instances, that isn't going to be super useful, right? If they view you mostly as a teacher, then they might think you don't really have the know-how to apply it in practice. But there's going to be cases where that's the other way around. You need to play it by ear, get a sense of what the clients want or like. Your traditional section should not be more than 4 pages long. And you might notice the order in which I've placed the subsections. In particular, education is not the thing that comes first. Eventually, you'll have a long list of projects. You might not put all of them in, but you may choose to include specific projects from different domains that highlight successes and the breadth of your experience. Now, I've been consulting for about 15 years. On my CV right now, there's about 30 projects that I've put up there. And it looks impressive. My CV is about 16 pages long. So 4 pages for the traditional section, and then 12 pages for the relevant project experience. You might look at this CV and compare it with yours, and you might feel like you don't have a lot to offer. But you have to remember, it's conceivable that you haven't yet had a project. In this class, we will do one project that you will be able to add to your relevant project experience section, but you should not be disappointed when you look at your CV if you can't fill in more than 1 page. We're going to start by taking a look at an old CV of mine. I think this one dates back to 2013. It wasn't written for a consulting project, it was just a CV I had at the time. So, you know, the typical stuff you would see, the name of the individual, the address, contact information, and then there's this little blurb that everybody asks you to put in there, the objective part. Trying to tell people what you're about, in a sense. I oscillate as to whether this is a good thing to put on a CV or not. I go back and forth. If you can write a nice little blurb, that's fantastic, and of course you can use that blurb as the baseline for your bio, which we'll talk about later. But in general, you'd want this to be as short as possible. The objective of a CV is pretty self-explanatory. One of the things I remember being taught related to CVs is the idea that I should try to identify some core competencies, things that I can do that are presumably not stuff that everybody else can do. So back then I chose to emphasize the problem-solving abilities that I had, the fact that I was both able to lead projects and, you know, be a valuable member of the team even if I wasn't in a leadership position. I can learn things quickly. I had written a lot of things both in English and French, and I was pretty good about gathering data and processing it. One thing you'll notice is that we use the same sentence structure for all of these competencies. In this version of the CV, I then switched to technological and scientific skills. Quantitative skills is what you'd be adding here for yourself. I decided to put my education right off the bat. The degrees you have, I'm only showing you 2 of them here. Courses you might have taken, the dates, if you've published anything, sort of highlighted as well. Paradoxically, it's not always a great idea to put that up front. It is sort of assumed that you have the training in the background here, at least when it comes to consulting. You wouldn't be putting yourself out there if you didn't have the right skill set. It would be too easy to be caught with your pants down. So leaving it till the end might actually be beneficial for you. Another piece of advice I've been given, and I'm going to relay that piece of advice to you, you should have a section on selected achievements. Basically a summary of the CV. Summary of the things you think are important for prospective employers and or clients to know. In my list of selected achievements, you use nice action words to describe what it is that you specifically did. And in that version of the CV, I decided to bold the words so it would be clear what my actions were. Designed, implemented, co-authored. I just gave you a screenshot of 4 of them here. There were more in the original CV. It could also be useful for the client to see that you have some relevant work experience. Presumably, you didn't become a consultant right out of school. You got a job, you got some experience, and then you branched out into consulting. So what's usually suggested that we do here, give the title of the position, where you worked, the years you worked there, and a description of the tasks that you accomplished when you were working there. Again, this screenshot only shows you 2 of the many jobs I've had over the years. Try to stick to jobs that are relevant to the position you're applying to or to the contract that you're trying to get. You might have been a lifeguard at some point, probably not something worth putting in your quantitative CV. I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show The Big Bang Theory. One of the fears that clients have when they hire quantitative consultants is that they're going to be working with a Sheldon. They don't want to work with a Sheldon. And they've spent enough time around quantitative people for the fear to be potentially justified. This is part of your chance to let them know that you are not a charlatan, that you have interests outside of quantitative matters, outside of work. It's your chance as well to inject a little bit of personality into your CV. You can take a look at the corresponding sample file. It's a 4-page CV. I've also added one of my former students' CV just to give you an idea as to how these things would differ if you were just freshly out of school and didn't have a lot of work experience. That takes care of the traditional CV section. Now, if you want to add some information regarding past projects, you would typically list the title of the project, the dates as well, give a project description, assuming that the client allows you to do so. Some projects might have security requirements, which make it impossible for you to fully describe them. And then any report or presentation you gave related to that project. Notice here, I have someone else's name along with mine. You're going to have collaborators. You need to make sure that you give them credit for the work that they have done. It's not only good citizenship, it's also a way for you to showcase that you can do teamwork. Some consultants also like to indicate their roles, whether they were team lead or not, and the value of the contract. This isn't something that speaks to me specifically, but it may speak to you. You'll notice here as well that the write-ups for the project descriptions basically always follow the same pattern. You can use your own voice. You can decide to write in the present tense instead of the past tense if you choose to do so. Using the active voice instead of the passive voice. Whatever you choose, you just need to be consistent from one project description to the next. One last thing I'm going to point out about these CVs. In the North American context, you do not typically provide, as part of your personal information, picture, your gender, or your marital status. I understand that in different parts of the world this is expected. Here it is frowned upon. We talk about social media presence. Look, here's a few platforms that currently you should consider using for your consulting activities. LinkedIn. Think of it as boring Facebook. You might want to consider accepting invites from people you don't know because that allows you to expand your network. You should post regularly if you're going to be using LinkedIn. I don't. I should, but I never get around to it for some reason. Twitter, another good place. You might want to retweet articles and posts of interest with a commentary rather than just flat out retweeting something else you've seen. Get to know who the experts in the field are, and you should follow them. You should post regularly as well. Again, I'm highlighting with a commentary. That's something I have a hard time doing. We are going to do a social media exercise because, amongst other things, it helps me remember that I should be more thorough with my Twitter approach. As I've mentioned, if you have an online presence, you might want to separate your personal identity from your professional identity. There's a number of pitfalls to be wary of when we use online marketing. Avoid trolling situations, flame wars, lousy spelling, generational slang, and so forth. Now here's a very important point to address. How are you going to deal with the differences? I wrote potential here, but there's going to be differences between your business social media needs and your personal ones. On a personal level, I am excessively liberal in the United States sense of the term. But I'm not a very gregarious online person. I don't have much of a personal Twitter presence. I do have a business Twitter presence. I have struggled in the past with deciding when my personal views should be represented on my business social media. I don't know the right answer to this dilemma. If it's just you and your company, if your business social media is just you talking or tweeting, you can probably mix your personal views with your business views. If you're working in a company, it might be frowned upon for you to mix business and personal views. Does that mean that you should not speak about personal issues in your business feed? I don't know. I want to say no, you should still be who you are, but I've never been in a big company business situation where there might be a conflict between my personal views and my employer's official views. You should be prepared to potentially lose business if your personal views are not aligned with those of prospective clients. But I think you should be prepared to lose business in general. At any rate, this is a choice you will have to make personally. I will not impose mine, nor will I impose my cultural and societal views. Another approach is to keep a blog. There's many purposes there. You might want to do content aggregation. You might use it to interact with the community, to push content, and to showcase your communication technical skills and interests. This is one of the things I'm going to ask you to do as well. Write a little blog article on a topic that you and I will agree to. These are not journal articles. The key point there is that you're trying to communicate technical results to an audience that may or may not be technical. If eventually you choose to write a blog article using a project on which you've worked in the past, you need to make sure you get the permission of the client before you can do so. Now, that might have been negotiated ahead of time and put in the contract, but it doesn't hurt for you to do a courtesy call. Here we have two examples of blogs. The first one is by Maya Pelletier, a former student in the class. She wrote this brilliant Tour de France winners blog. It's targeted to a wide audience. It's witty, it's funny. I think it's a great example of what a quantitative blog article could be. The other one is more technical. This is something that I wrote with another former student, Olivier Leduc. It's a technical description of what the machine learning technique of boosting is. And so this is one which establishes that we have theoretical know-how of advanced methods. Both of these could provide you with a good template for the article you'll have to write in the course. I'm going to end by showing you 3 different types of bios. You can take a look at the corresponding document to read my comments and notes on them.